If you're planning a trip to the past, there's one era you should absolutely avoid at all costs: the Cretaceous period. We're talking about 145 to 66 million years ago, when Earth had transformed into a death trap so comprehensive, so perfectly designed to eliminate anything resembling human life, that survival wouldn't be measured in days or hours. You'd be lucky to last minutes. Because unlike other dangerous periods in Earth's history, the Cretaceous had perfected the art of layered threats. Welcome to your nightmare vacation. The Cretaceous wasn't just hot, it was wildly unpredictable. Volcanic eruptions, insane CO2 levels, and shifting ocean currents meant the weather didn't follow any pattern we'd recognize. One day could swing from blistering 120-degree Fahrenheit heat to near freezing by afternoon, all thanks to ash clouds blotting out the sun. And these weren't seasonal shifts, they were sudden, violent, and deadly. The atmosphere? Just as unforgiving. CO2 levels were so high that every breath would feel like trying to suck air through a wet towel in a sauna. Oxygen was scarce, humidity was off the charts, and toxic gases from volcanic seas turned each raindrop into acid. You wouldn't just sweat, you'd choke, burn, and dehydrate at the same time. Pressure drops from eruptions could mess with your lungs and eardrums, while lightning storms crackled overhead with enough energy to vaporize anything they hit. And when it rained, it poured, literally in feet per hour. Flash floods boiled with volcanic heat, sweeping away everything in their path. When it didn't rain, you'd get dust storms big enough to cover continents, hurling debris at 200 miles per hour and blacking out the sky. The ground was no better. Earthquakes came in swarms. Landslides buried valleys without warning, and the landscape never stopped shifting. Entire coastlines could vanish overnight, and just when you thought things might settle down, another asteroid would drop from the sky and wipe out everything in a 1,000-mile radius. But hey, at least you haven't met the dinosaurs yet. That's when things get really interesting. Assuming you somehow survived the Cretaceous air, heat, and chaos without dropping dead, congratulations. You now have a front row seat to the most terrifying roster of predators this planet has ever known. First up on the kill list, meet Giganotosaurus, a name that literally translates to giant southern lizard. This South American nightmare stretched up to 43 feet or 13 meters in length and weighed in at a crushing 8 tons, making it potentially larger than T-Rex. Unlike the bone-crushing bite of T-Rex, Giganotosaurus was equipped with blade-like teeth designed for one thing: slicing massive chunks of flesh from still-living prey. While these apex predators fared well on their own, fossil evidence suggests they sometimes operated in loose groups, coordinating attacks on the massive sauropods that roamed South America. When creatures this size teamed up, it wasn't just a hunt, it was a coordinated takedown of walking skyscrapers. But South America wasn't the only continent hosting apex nightmares. Africa had Carcharodontosaurus, whose name means shark-toothed lizard. At 44 feet or 13.5 meters long and weighing up to 9 tons, this terror possessed some of the most vicious dentition in the fossil record. Its teeth weren't just sharp, they were recurved, serrated, and constantly replaced. Drop one while tearing through a triceratops, no problem. Another was already growing in to take its place. And to make things worse, it had a brain-to-body ratio comparable to modern crocodiles, animals already known for their problem-solving and ambush tactics. In other words, it didn't just have the tools to kill you, it likely had the brains to make sure it happened. And then comes the name that needs no introduction: Tyrannosaurus rex. At 40 feet, 12 meters long, and weighing 7 tons, T-Rex wasn't just big. It was built for absolute destruction. With a bite force of 57,000 newtons, about the weight of a medium-sized truck, driven through banana-sized teeth, it didn't just kill prey. It pulverized it into manageable chunks with the brutal efficiency of an industrial meat grinder. With its exceptional vision and an even better sense of smell, it could spot movement from over a mile away and track scent trails like a bloodhound with anger management issues. T-Rex also showed evidence of complex hunting behaviors and may have been capable of setting traps for its prey, making escape almost impossible once you were marked. If you're thinking, well, at least these giant predators were slow and clumsy, Carnotaurus would shatter that delusion in a heartbeat. Nicknamed the meat-eating bull, this 26-foot or 8-meter South American speed demon could hit 35 miles per hour or 56 kilometers per hour, faster than any human has ever run. And just to make sure escape wasn't an option, it came equipped with forward-facing horns above its eyes, because apparently outrunning you wasn't enough. It needed to gore you once it caught up. But the real nightmare fuel comes when we talk about Spinosaurus, the largest predatory dinosaur ever discovered. At an absolutely mind-bending 50 feet or 15 meters long, and weighing as much as 9 to 10 tons, Spinosaurus makes every other predator on this list look like house cats. And while other predators were limited to land hunting, Spinosaurus could hunt you on land, in rivers, in lakes, and along coastlines. It had webbed feet, dense bones for underwater maneuvering, and a crocodile-like skull packed with conical teeth perfect for grabbing slippery prey. While it's important to point out these apex predators didn't all live at the same time or in the same regions, some separated by millions of years and entire continents, it just drives home the point that no matter where or when you find yourself in the Cretaceous, there's always a bloodthirsty theropod nearby, and it's always hunting. But these weren't the only large predators stalking the Cretaceous landscape. They were just the biggest. The medium-sized ones, a relative term when we're talking about creatures that would tower over modern elephants, were often more numerous, more aggressive, and far more persistent. Let's start with Albertosaurus, T-Rex's smaller, faster, and arguably more dangerous cousin. At 30 feet or 9 meters long and weighing around 3 tons, it might sound almost manageable compared to its bulkier relatives. But what made Albertosaurus terrifying wasn't just size, it was coordination. Fossil beds in Alberta, Canada reveal multiple individuals of different ages buried together, hinting at a structured family group, not a chaotic mob, but something closer to a tactical unit. Unlike T-Rex, which relied on raw power, Albertosaurus brought speed and numbers. It could run faster, strike quicker, and adapt mid-hunt. Adults likely led the charge, while younger, more agile juveniles flanked from the sides, cutting off any chance of escape. Facing one would be bad enough, but a group moving like a well-oiled machine, you wouldn't even make it to the second sprint. Gorgosaurus takes this horror show to the next level. Slightly smaller than Albertosaurus at 26 feet or 8 meters, Gorgosaurus made up for its reduced size with increased aggression and superior hunting coordination. These North American terrors possessed exceptionally keen senses and were built for pursuit hunting, meaning once they picked up your scent, they wouldn't stop following until they'd run you to exhaustion. And unlike solo predators who might give up if the hunt proves too difficult, pack hunters like Gorgosaurus could afford to be persistent. If one got tired, another would take over the chase. Then we have Daspletosaurus, whose name literally means frightful lizard. And paleontologists weren't being poetic. At 28 feet or 8.5 meters long, Daspletosaurus represented the perfect balance of size, speed, and pure predatory instinct. What made it particularly nightmarish was its hunting style. Daspletosaurus was a pursuit predator that could maintain high speeds over long distances. It didn't rely on ambush tactics or overwhelming size. It simply chased down its prey until exhaustion made the kill inevitable. But North America wasn't the only continent perfecting the art of medium-sized terror. Madagascar contributed Majungasaurus, a 23-foot or 7-meter predator with one particularly disturbing characteristic. It was a confirmed cannibal. Fossil evidence shows Majungasaurus regularly fed on other members of its own species. The cannibalistic behavior wasn't just opportunistic scavenging either. Majungasaurus actively hunted other Majungasaurus, suggesting a level of aggressive territoriality that made every encounter potentially deadly. In a landscape where even the predators were hunting each other, a human wouldn't just be prey, you'd be the equivalent of a convenience store snack. South America offered its own contribution to the medium predator nightmare club with Abelisaurus, a 21-foot or 6.5-meter terror whose skull was built like a battering ram. Unlike other predators that relied primarily on bite force, Abelisaurus could literally headbutt prey to death before moving in for the kill. Its reinforced skull and powerful neck muscles meant it could deliver devastating blows that would shatter bones and cause massive internal trauma. But perhaps the most unsettling of all were the smaller pack hunters. And yes, smaller still means creatures that were 6 to 12 feet long and weighed several hundred pounds. Dromaeosaurus, the running lizard, was only 6 feet or 1.8 meters long, but possessed the most advanced killing tools in the entire Cretaceous arsenal: sickle-shaped claws on each foot, designed for disemboweling prey. These weren't just big claws, they were precision instruments. Dromaeosaurus would leap onto prey, sink its claws deep into flesh, and then use its powerful leg muscles to rake downward, opening massive wounds that would cause rapid blood loss and shock. And like their larger cousins, they hunted in packs. Troodon represents perhaps the most terrifying combination of all: intelligence married to predatory instinct. At 8 feet or 2.4 meters long, Troodon possessed the largest brain-to-body ratio of any dinosaur, exceptional night vision, and grasping hands with sharp claws. These weren't just mindless killing machines. They were problem solvers who could adapt their hunting strategies based on prey behavior. Fossil evidence suggests Troodon may have been capable of complex reasoning, tool use, and even rudimentary communication with pack members. Imagine being hunted by creatures smart enough to predict your movements, set traps, and coordinate attacks with military precision. And here's the truly nightmarish part about all these medium-sized predators: they were everywhere. While the apex predators, like T-Rex, were relatively rare due to the massive amount of territory each one required, these medium-sized hunters existed in much higher population densities. You might go days without seeing a Giganotosaurus, but you'd encounter multiple packs of Albertosaurus, Gorgosaurus, or Dromaeosaurus every single day. But even if you somehow managed to evade all these nightmare predators, you'd still have to deal with another terrifying reality: the herbivores. And no, not because they were hunting you, because many of them were massive, territorial, and more than capable of turning you into a smear on the forest floor if you got too close. Let's start with Ankylosaurus. At 33 feet or 10 meters long and weighing around 6 tons, it was essentially a walking fortress, covered in bony plates, spikes, and bad attitude. But the real nightmare was its tail. A massive club made of fused bone that could swing with enough force to shatter the leg bones of a T-Rex. Fossil evidence actually shows ankylosaur tail clubs embedded in predator fossils, meaning these gentle herbivores regularly turned apex predators into broken, limping casualties. You wouldn't be dealing with a measured, calculated attack if you accidentally startled one of these living tanks. Instead, you'd be facing a 6-ton panic response, one that involved swinging a bone club with the force of a wrecking ball in every direction until the threat was gone. Ankylosaurus wouldn't even realize it had just turned you into human paste. You'd be nothing more than collateral damage from a creature simply having a bad day. Boreala pelta takes the armored nightmare concept and adds a special twist: camouflage. This 18-foot or 5.5-meter herbivore was covered in armor so sophisticated that it included countershading patterns to help it blend into its environment. Think about that for a moment. a creature the size of a city bus that you literally cannot see coming until it's too late. One moment you're picking berries, the next moment you're being trampled by an invisible tank that was just trying to find some nice ferns for lunch. But if you think armored herbivores are bad, wait until you meet the ceratopsians, the horned dinosaurs that treated every interaction as a potential ramming contest. Triceratops, the poster child for 3 horns and an attitude problem, stretched 30 feet or 9 meters long and weighed up to 8 tons. Those weren't decorative horns on its face. They were 3-foot-long spears designed to punch through the armor of anything that looked at them wrong. Triceratops herds could number in the hundreds, turning vast stretches of landscape into mobile minefields of horn-equipped battering rams. These weren't peaceful grazers who would flee at the first sign of trouble. Fossil evidence shows Triceratops regularly engaged in head-to-head combat with T-Rex, and won often enough that many T-Rex skulls show healed injuries from Triceratops horns. When your prey animal is regularly hospitalizing apex predators, you know you're dealing with something that views violence as a first resort, not a last one. Styracosaurus somehow managed to make Triceratops look underarmed. Along with the standard face horns, Styracosaurus sported a crown of spikes protruding from the back of its skull, creating a walking nightmare that looked like it was designed by someone who thought regular dinosaurs weren't quite stabby enough. At 18 feet, or 5.5 meters long, Styracosaurus was smaller than Triceratops, but made up for it with sheer aggressive ornamentation and a territorial streak that made honey badgers look reasonable. Pentaceratops took the more horns equal more problems philosophy to its logical extreme, sporting 5 facial horns and a frill decorated with additional spikes. At 28 feet, or 8.5 meters long, this North American terror was essentially a mobile weapons platform that happened to eat plants. The name literally means 5-horned face, because apparently paleontologists occasionally embrace truth in advertising. But the true horror of herbivorous dinosaurs wasn't their weapons. It was their size and the physics of accidental death. Argentinosaurus, a 100-foot or 10-meter sauropod and weighing close to 100 tons, its sheer existence rewrote the rules of danger. A single step could flatten a forest, but its tail, massive, muscular, and always in motion, was the real silent killer. This wasn't a weapon. It was just how Argentinosaurus signaled, kept balance, or swatted away flies. But the unintentional swing of that tail could cleave through trees, collapse cliff sides, or obliterate anything in the wrong place at the wrong time. Being hit by it wouldn't just kill you. It would reduce you to pulp. Accidental roadkill on a prehistoric scale. Alamosaurus represents the nightmare scenario of herbivore encounters, the accidental stampede. At 69 feet or 21 meters long and weighing up to 33 tons, a single Alamosaurus was essentially a walking earthquake. Now imagine herds of these titans moving across the landscape like living landslides, completely oblivious to anything smaller than a city block. The ground would shake for miles when an Alamosaurus herd was on the move. Trees would snap like twigs under their feet. Anything caught in their path, including other dinosaurs, would simply be absorbed into the landscape as these titans passed by. You wouldn't be hunted or attacked. You'd be accidentally incorporated into the geological record. But perhaps the most psychologically disturbing herbivores were the hadrosaurs, the duck-billed dinosaurs that seemed harmless until you realized they traveled in herds that could number in the thousands. Parasaurolophus, with its distinctive hollow crest, could communicate across vast distances using low-frequency calls that modern humans can't even hear properly. These 33-foot or 10-meter herbivores could coordinate herd movements across entire continents, creating migration patterns that would make the wildebeest migrations of Africa look like a casual neighborhood stroll. Edmontosaurus took herd mentality to terrifying extremes, with some fossil sites showing evidence of groups containing over 10,000 individuals. Picture being caught in the middle of a 10,000-strong stampede of creatures that each weigh as much as an elephant and are in full panic mode because they heard a T-Rex sneeze 3 miles away. The drumbeat of 40,000 feet hitting the ground simultaneously would be audible from orbit. The Morrison Formation, just one geological region, has yielded fossils representing millions of individual herbivorous dinosaurs. The Cretaceous landscape was essentially wall-to-wall plant eaters, each one capable of accidentally killing you in increasingly creative ways. Even the sky wanted you dead. At the top of the aerial food chain was Quetzalcoatlus, a pterosaur with a wingspan of over 36 feet or 11 meters. That's not a bird, that's a flying giraffe with a spear for a beak. Unlike most modern birds, Quetzalcoatlus didn't soar high looking for fish. It stalked the ground like a stork, using that massive neck and razor-sharp beak to impale anything that moved, including small dinosaurs, or you. And if you thought you could outrun it, think again. These monsters could launch into the air using all 4 limbs, leaping like demonic pole vaulters, before flapping into a low glide. Vast, silent, and utterly impossible to see coming until it was already over. But Quetzalcoatlus wasn't alone. The skies were crowded with aerial nightmares, each one perfectly adapted to make your life short and painful. Pteranodon, with its 20-foot wingspan and dagger-shaped skull, ruled the coasts. While technically a fish-eater, it didn't exactly discriminate. If it could lift you, you were food. And even if it didn't eat you, it might drop you from 100 feet up just for existing. Then there were the smaller, faster killers, Nyctosaurus, Tupandactylus, and others that darted like living missiles through thick tropical skies. These weren't scavengers, they were precision hunters, dive-bombing prey with speeds that could shatter bone and leave you bleeding out on a cliffside, screaming into a storm. And at night, things got worse. Many pterosaurs had massive eye sockets and lightweight frames, meaning they could hunt in low light, swoop between trees, and pick off anything not under cover. You wouldn't even hear them coming. Just a gust of wind, a flash of wings, and then the sky takes you. So unless you had a bunker, wings, or a death wish, looking up didn't mean hope. It meant incoming. But at least on land, you could see most of these threats coming. The real nightmare was what happened when you tried to escape by heading for the water. The Cretaceous seas of this era weren't just dangerous. They were a liquid hellscape populated by creatures so impossibly large and vicious that they make modern great white sharks look like goldfish with anger management issues. Let's dive right into the nightmare with Tylosaurus, a mosasaur that measured up to 46 feet or 14 meters of pure aquatic death. Picture a crocodile, but stretch it to the length of a school bus. Give it flippers instead of legs, and pack its mouth with teeth designed to crush through the shells of other massive marine reptiles. Tylosaurus wasn't just big, it was built like a biological torpedo designed for ramming attacks that could split smaller prey in half on impact. The fossil record shows us something deeply unsettling about Tylosaurus hunting behavior. They were pursuit predators in an environment where there was literally nowhere to hide. Unlike terrestrial predators who might give up the chase after a reasonable distance, Tylosaurus could follow prey for hundreds of miles across open ocean, never tiring, never stopping, until exhaustion made the kill inevitable. But Tylosaurus was just one member of the mosasaur family that had turned Cretaceous oceans into their personal hunting preserve. Prognathodon took a different approach to maritime terror. Instead of relying on speed and ramming attacks, this 37-foot or 11-meter nightmare was built like an underwater bulldozer with jaws that could bite through virtually anything. Fossil evidence shows Prognathodon regularly fed on other mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and even sharks. What made Prognathodon particularly horrifying was its hunting strategy. Rather than pursuing prey across vast distances, it was an ambush predator that could remain motionless in the water for hours, looking like nothing more than a floating log until some unfortunate creature came within striking distance. Then those massive jaws would snap shut, with enough force to crush a small car, and whatever had been swimming by would simply cease to exist. The smaller mosasaurs were somehow even more unsettling. Platecarpus, at only 7 meters long, hunted in groups and possessed a level of coordination that suggests considerable intelligence. Imagine being surrounded by a pod of creatures that were individually capable of biting you in half, working together with the tactical precision of wolves. Except these wolves were the size of orcas and equipped with crocodile jaws. But mosasaurs weren't the only marine nightmares patrolling Cretaceous waters. Plesiosaurs had dominated the seas for ages, and by the Cretaceous, they'd reached their most terrifying forms. Styxosaurus had a neck longer than its entire body, over 23 feet or 7 meters of serpentine horror that could strike at prey from impossible angles. Lidzichthys might have been a filter feeder, but at 54 feet or 16.5 meters long, it was essentially a swimming building that could accidentally crush anything in its path. And then there were the sharks, because of course, the Cretaceous had to perfect those as well. Cretoxorhina, known as the Ginsu shark, stretched 24 feet or 7.3 meters long, and possessed teeth that were literally sharper than surgical instruments. Fossil evidence shows Cretoxorhina regularly preyed on mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and other sharks, meaning it was apex predator in a sea full of apex predators. But unlike modern great whites that typically attack from below in a single devastating bite, Cretoxorhina was a persistence hunter that would follow prey for days, taking small bites here and there until blood loss and exhaustion made the final kill inevitable. Being hunted by Cretoxorhina was like being slowly carved apart by a living buzzsaw that followed you wherever you went. Squalicorax, the crow shark, was smaller at 16 feet or 5 meters, but traveled in groups and possessed an intelligence that allowed for coordinated hunting strategies. Imagine being surrounded by a dozen sharks, each one individually capable of biting you in half, working together to cut off escape routes and take turns attacking until nothing was left but bone fragments settling into the deep ocean sediment. The coastal areas offered no refuge either. Dinosuchus, while technically not a marine reptile, patrolled the river mouths and coastal swamps with the patience of a creature that had perfected the art of explosive ambush attacks. At 33 feet or 10 meters long, Dinosuchus was essentially a crocodile scaled up to kaiju proportions. Its bite force has been estimated at over 102,000 newtons, roughly twice that of T-Rex, and more than enough to crush a small car. Dinosuchus didn't hunt, it simply waited. Fossil evidence shows these titans could remain motionless in shallow water for hours or even days, looking like nothing more than a floating log until something came close enough to drink. Then, those massive jaws would explode out of the water with enough force to grab creatures as large as small dinosaurs and drag them into a death roll that would tear apart anything caught in its grip. But perhaps most terrifying of all was the simple fact that Cretaceous oceans were deeper and more extensive than modern seas. The water that covered much of what we now call dry land meant there were vast stretches of shallow, warm seas that served as perfect breeding grounds for every conceivable form of aquatic nightmare. You couldn't just avoid the deep ocean. The monsters were literally everywhere water existed. And speaking of water, even the coastlines were death traps. The massive tidal ranges caused by the different continental configurations meant that areas that were safe shallow water during low tide would become 50-foot deep hunting grounds for mosasaurs during high tide. You could be walking along what seemed like a safe beach and suddenly find yourself swimming with Tylosaurus, because the tide changed faster than you could retreat to higher ground. So, could you do it? Could you survive the Cretaceous? Or would you rather flip to the next page in the Prehistoric time travel catalogue and see if the Jurassic offers any better odds? And as always, this is Roaring Echo. Thank you for watching.